differences between basically kids with ADHD and adults with ADHD, the different symptoms as well as treatments. And today we have Dana Kay with me today. And Dana Kay is a board certified holistic health and nutrition practitioner. She's a 2 times international best selling author and the CEO and founder of ADHD Thrive Institute. As a mother of a child with ADHD, she knows firsthand the struggle that come with parenting a neurodiverse child and the freedom that is possible once parents, learn to reduce ADHD symptoms. Dana has been featured in Forbes and Authority magazine and on Medium, Thrive Global, and various other online media. She has also been a guest at multiple parenting and ADHD summits and podcasts. Her mission is to help families reduce ADHD symptoms naturally so that children with ADHD can thrive at home, at school, and in life. So what I want you guys to do as you guys are coming onto the live stream, if you can actually go ahead and put your questions that you do have for Dana and for me. We're going to be asking some questions for each other, the differences between ADHD between kids and adults. So first just question I have for you, Dana, is can you tell us a little bit about why you began working in the holistic and nutrition industry?
Well, I just want to say hi first. How are you, Dr. LeGrand? And thanks to everyone. And hi, I'm so glad to be here. Super, super excited because, this conversation isn't had enough about the differences between children and adults. And so I love that we can have this conversation and we can help the listeners out there really, really get that understanding. I know I have so many people come to me saying, "Oh, do you work with parents? Do you work with adults?" And I know that you have a lot of people coming to you as well, saying, "Do you work with children?" And so it's great that we can now go, "I don't work with an adult, but here, go and see Dr. LeGrand," and you can say vice versa. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Really, really appreciate it.
For sure, because I
Yeah.
know, a lot of you guys have reached out to me, where I've been looking for somebody, that actually sees kids, and that's Dana right here. And probably, another question I have for you, Dana, and then I know we're just getting people that are just coming on. We're gonna
Yeah.
answer questions at the tail end. I just have a few questions for Dana, and then Dana has some questions for me, just to kind of give you guys the differences. But definitely put your questions in now, and we'll make sure to get through all the questions that people do have. But
Yeah.
Dana, for you, why do you, advocate more of a food first approach to ADHD as support for children, and what does that actually mean?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think I'll just sort of take a step back and go to that question that you asked at the beginning, just to give you a bit of background as to why I really advocate that.
Yeah.
I wasn't always in this field. I was actually an accountant in a past life. Please don't tell anyone or share that. But I probably would still be there if the concerns over my own son's health hadn't have grown as much as they did. And uh, his meltdowns were just so dramatic, and his energy was like he was bouncing off the walls and so much higher than every other child. And my gut really told me that something was missing. And I'd go to the doctors and they'd be like, "No, he's just a typical boy." I'd ask the teachers, "No, he's just a typical boy." But eventually it all started to catch up. And that's when, the teachers started noticing the differences. And, he was diagnosed when he was 4, so quite young,
Yeah.
and immediately put on medication. At first, honestly, I felt relieved with the diagnosis and with the medication. I was thinking, we're finally going to get the help that we needed. But then the dosage increased, the side effects became
Yeah.
worse and worse. His doctor prescribed another prescription to counteract the side effects of the first. And this continued until my son, who was now 5, was on 3 very strong ADHD medications. And when the doctor suggested a 4th medication to counteract some new side effects that came up, I
Mhm.
just was like, not okay. This
Yeah.
is not okay. This is I don't know what's going on. And that's when my career path completely changed. I went back to school. I did my holistic health degree, multiple specific certifications in this area, and really learned how food can affect so many aspects of our lives, and began learning that ADHD symptoms can be reduced naturally. And,
Yeah.
today my son's thriving. He hasn't been on meds for years.
That's
He's
awesome.
13, I know. He's a teenager. He's in middle school, and he's doing so well at school. But most importantly, he's happy, and my family's happy, and we now have sort of that peace and calm in our house. And look, to be honest, that's really why I advocate a food first approach. It's there are so many different pieces of the puzzle to ADHD symptom reduction when you go this natural approach. But, when children are first diagnosed with ADHD, that first course of action that most doctors suggest is medication. And many of them don't tell parents that altering the diet can significantly reduce ADHD symptoms. And this is what happened with my son. Side effect, new meds. And so once I started learning about inflammatory foods, I started learning about gut health, started really diving deep into those underlying hidden stressors that can be contributing to ADHD. That's when, we started to see this change. And so I recommend a food first approach because, look, I'm not against medication if you're in this chronic state, but it shouldn't be the first course of action, not when food and other natural strategies can sometimes be even more effective with no side effects to worry about.
Yeah.
If parents want to reduce ADHD symptoms in their child, they must do something much, much more than just give a pill or a supplement. Even supplements are great and can be really effective, and so can medication. But if children continue to eat processed inflammatory foods, like gluten, dairy, soy, these ADHD symptoms, they're not going to go away because these foods are exacerbating the symptoms.
Yeah. No, which kind of naturally next question I have for you, and I know a lot of my audience always, asks is like, what specific foods are worst, for kids with ADHD, for children?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and I'm just gonna say, if you haven't, if you haven't seen me or heard me before, you may get shocked at what I'm about to say. So all I'm gonna say right now is Rome wasn't built in a day. You don't need to make all of these changes in day one. But for me, the top three inflammatory foods that I recommend all families remove are gluten, dairy, and soy, because these are the three foods that are driving that inflammation in the body, and they're highly inflammatory, and they can lead to an immune response, and they can lead to leaky gut, which is a topic for another day, which I'm sure you've talked about a lot
Hmm.
before. But
Yeah.
I also go beyond that and say that, children with ADHD should avoid artificial flavors and colors and refined and excess sugar. So, these substances can have a great effect on the body, the brain, and the gut.
Yeah. Awesome. So if you guys are just joining on, now we're getting more people coming in here. I'm having questions with Dana Kay. Dana Kay is a board certified holistic health and nutrition practitioner that focuses on helping kids with ADHD and helping families. And so we're talking about the differences between children with ADHD versus adults with ADHD. And so I'm just asking some questions. So definitely put your questions, if you do have any, for Dana or for me, in the chat, so that way we can answer those questions for you. So my next question for you, Dana, is like, and I know this is something I get a lot too, when a lot of people from my audience is like, are some of the the big challenges
Mm.
of changing the way that your actually family eats? Like, what are some of the big challenges that you face, and maybe some tips around that?
Yeah, look, there are a lot of big challenges, especially when
Yeah.
you're dealing with children. And For me, I'll tell you what not to do, which is what I did. I tried to change everything on day one, and this is not the approach that I teach. It led me to have multiple panic attacks on the floor. What am I going to feed my kids? But that's not the right way to do it. And as I said earlier, Rome wasn't built in a day, and transforming your family's diet and bringing in these natural strategies, they're not going to be complete in a day either. It's not a race. It's a marathon, and it's okay to take it slowly. It's okay to take that one step at a time. And if the pace that's doable for you and your life is one change a week, then let it be that way. If it's one change every 2 weeks, then that's perfectly okay. Families really need to give themselves permission to take things slow. So that's definitely one challenge. Um, I mean, I think this is a challenge for everyone right now. Eating healthy can be expensive, and I think that bringing in strategies to help overcome that. Look, someday I would love this to change. I would love to see healthier foods be on the same price or even cheaper than those processed CRAP foods.
For sure.
The sad diet, the standard American diet. But that's another tangent for another day. And I'm sure, Dr. Grand, we can, probably have so many topics that can come out of
Oh,
this
yes,
one.
for sure. I
Um,
think another big topic on all those things, I think,
Definitely,
could be
definitely. But there's
covered.
lots of things that you can do to make it more affordable. One thing for me that really helped me was the way that I changed my mindset, because, it isn't a way to save money, but, when you change your mindset to remember that even though these cheaper, bad food choices may seem like they're easier and better for the budget today, they actually cost us more in the long run in the form of tantrums,
Yeah.
meltdowns, kids doing bad at school. So when I had that mindset shift, it actually helped me a lot. I'd much rather my family have a higher grocery bill today and a happier, healthier, calm house
Yeah.
than a lower grocery bill and be in that state of dysfunction that we were in. But that being said, let me give you a few strategies. I don't want to leave the listeners, pining for more. Look, I will say that if you are continually buying packaged foods, yes, gluten, dairy, soy free, or better for you, candy and stuff, it is more expensive. So focus on whole foods as much as possible, because whole foods are fresh. You can go to the farmers market and much cheaper. The second tip would be meal plan, meal plan, meal plan. It's probably the best thing families can do to save money on nutritious food. Really prevents us from sort of running through the drive-through or grabbing that convenience food
Yeah.
that costs more and isn't as nutritious.
Yeah.
Um, Buy food when it's on sale and freeze it. Um, you can also take a look at the Dirty Dozen and Clean 15 to figure out which produce to buy organic and which is okay to not buy organic. I do prefer to buy everything organic, but many families save money by just buying the organic fruits and veggies that are on the Dirty Dozen list. So
Yeah.
that's the ones that are sprayed with more pesticides. You can go
Yeah.
to ewg.org for that one.
Okay.
Um, you can make bread from scratch. You can cook whole chickens, and you get so much from a whole chicken.
Yeah.
Never let those bananas go brown. You can pop them in the freezer and use them for smoothies or ice cream. So these are just a small sample, and I know that we're probably short for time, so I don't want to go into it too much. That's one of the challenges. Do you want me to go into some more, or what would you
Yeah,
prefer?
I was gonna actually ask the audience, I know as you guys are just listening, actually, you guys could chime in, if you guys are just coming in. Actually, if you have any questions specifically about what we're just talking about, it's pretty much about foods. Right now, we're talking about basically the challenges with facing, with a family of getting the right foods. And if you guys have any specific questions around that, or just any ADHD questions, we're definitely gonna go into, answering your guys' questions that you have for Dana or for myself. But I think one thing that would be really valuable, Dana's question I have is, you mentioned about lab testing, and a lot of my audience know that I do also extensive lab testing. So do you.
Hmm.
Tell me a little bit more about like kind of the functional lab tests that you maybe specifically do for kids, and then I can maybe share a little bit of what maybe
Yeah.
the differences of what we do with adults. So like, what are some lab testing that you do specifically with kids with
Yeah,
ADHD?
so look, there are so many out there that you can choose from, but I really like to sort of like do a core base set to start. There's four that I sort of choose from, and then later we can go down further paths if we need to. I've experimented with different ones over the time, and I just find that these four give us the really good picture of the state of the body at that point in time, and then it can point us in directions if we need to go to later. Now, the first test that we do is a stool test, and it gives us a great picture of what's going on in the gut. So it looks for things like parasites and bacteria and worms and yeast overgrowth, really good intestinal health markers, digestion, how you're digesting. And look, not all stool tests are created equal. So you
Yeah.
really just need to choose a practitioner that you know and trust, that, can order a good one for you. The ones that you can get from a traditional doctor will not cover all the things that you need to. And we haven't talked about the gut brain connection, but it's huge. And I'm sure you've talked about it a lot already on your
Yeah.
YouTube channel. That's one of the reasons that we do a stool test to start.
Yeah.
Now, the next test that we use is a food sensitivity test, and that looks for sort of those inflammatory reactions in the body to certain foods. Now, it's not like an adult where you can kind of tell if you're reacting to a food and you can avoid it yourself. It's really hard to do a complete elimination diet with a child. And that's why I
Yeah.
do like to use that food sensitivity testing. The good thing, though, is they're not true allergies, but they do cause inflammation in the body and break down the gut even further if you're continually eating them. So you can end up adding those foods back in once you've healed the gut. Not all food sensitivity tests are created equal either.
Right. No, that's
Um,
true. I can testify to
yeah,
that.
yeah, definitely. So really, again, making sure that you choose a practitioner that you know, like, and trust. The third test we use is an organic acid test. Awesome test. It gives us such good bang for our buck, and it looks at over 70 different important markers in the whole body and how it's functioning. So it can show you the need for specific nutrients, things like B vitamins, which are really important for our compromised kids. Further diet modifications, so things like salicylates and oxalates. So if we need to do some further diet modification, it looks at detoxification pathways. It looks at neurotransmitters, so your serotonin, your dopamine, your norepinephrine and epinephrine. It looks at mitochondrial function, which is like the powerhouse of the cells. And it also looks at the gut. So it's going to look at yeast, mold, bacteria, and C. diff, which is huge. The amount of times that I see C. diff in children, probably I'd say is sitting at about 50-50. But the good thing about finding C. diff is it actually inhibits an enzyme called dopamine beta hydroxylase. And that enzyme helps with the conversion of dopamine to norepinephrine and epinephrine.
Yeah.
And so you can get aggression and mood behaviors and all of these changes if that enzyme is inhibited. So finding C. diff, which does that, is so great because, yay, like a lot of their mood issues may be coming from that.
Yeah.
Um, Now, the last test that I use is called a cryptopyrrole test. Pyrroles are a normal chemical byproduct in the body, and they attach to vitamin B6 and zinc and draw these elements out of the body when they're excreted through the urine. So when you have these elevated cryptopyrrole levels, it can result in a dramatic deficiency of zinc and B6. And zinc and B6 are so important for all of our neurotransmitters
Oh
and,
yeah.
and our brain function and all of this sort of stuff. But it's frequently identified in behavioral disorders, ADHD, depression, aggression, violent behavior. The symptoms are things like poor tolerance to physical or emotional stress, poor anger control, mood swings, sensitivity to light or sound, tactile sensitivities, poor short term memory, just to name a few. But I mean, as you can see, a lot of those relate to kids with ADHD. And so that's a really, really great test.
Yeah. And yeah, just like I think with adults, I think probably the biggest change, that difference in the testing, that probably that we add on to that, when we I think one of the biggest differences that, well, I want to kind of talk a little bit more about the differences, especially with symptoms
Yep.
and even treatment. And probably the biggest thing that I notice is when you go from a kid that has ADHD and then you reach to adulthood, probably the biggest one that I do see has to do with burnout. So
Hmm.
kids, as we know, I mean, there's both the inattentive and there's definitely the hyperactive, or there's the mixed. And so when we see that in a kid and then you reach adulthood, especially if an adult might have had ADHD but never got diagnosed until adulthood, this is why we see a problem of people finally find out that they actually have ADHD, but they got put off for a long time being diagnosed having depression or anxiety, or when it really was just probably ADHD all along. But it's because it's presented so differently for adults, because it has to do, one of the testing that I like to do is do extensive hormone testing. I also like to
Hmm.
look at, a full thyroid panel, especially for women, but even for men as well. And even doing a full panel of micronutrient testing that can be deficient in seeing those things. And then you guys have heard me talk about, testing for neurotransmitters, but like even what Dana was talking about, a lot of the other things that actually build those specific neurotransmitters, such as vitamin B6 and zinc, are some of the two biggest ones. And you guys have heard me talk about vitamin B6, of how it is like, out of all the B vitamins, at least from what I've seen, and I think you can testify this to Dana, is like as well, it's one of the, out of all the B vitamins, that tend to actually help the conversion process for a lot of these different neurotransmitters. And
Mm.
so it is, we talk about vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 is really important, but vitamin B6, in my opinion, is one of the things that when it comes to brain chemistry is probably even more so important than vitamin B12.
Yeah,
Um,
totally agree.
and so, and also looking at, I think it's also still even for adults, looking at digestion is always going to be a problem too. The thing how I see kind of different is with adults, it's because you got to think about like the prolonged effects of other health conditions. So
Mm-hmm.
as a kid, most kids usually are going to tend to be healthy, or at least, because they're kids. They haven't had to deal with like diabetes, high blood pressure, other mental health issues that might be, impacting, such as depression and anxiety. And so when I'm working with adults, we have to run additional testing to understand the full picture of this, because it's more than just ADHD when it comes to your health. Because if you haven't actually addressed all those other concerns that are happening for your health, then it sabotages everything else. So that's probably what I'd say is like one of the biggest things as far as the testing differences. Now, as far as dietary, and maybe this question, and as you guys are coming on now, just to make it clear, I mean, people said we can hear us. Haven't seen any questions come in just yet. So if you want, go ahead and put your questions in the chat right now, either for Dana and I. We can definitely answer any questions you guys have with kids with ADHD or adults with ADHD, questions about symptoms, maybe treatment, any kind of questions that you have. Definitely put that in the chat, and Dana and I are more than happy to answer those questions for you. And I do just want to, as we're getting people in here, if you are interested in working with Dana, I did provide some links in the description where you can watch a quick it's only like a quick 15-minute, it's very thorough training. I think everybody should have time to be able to watch that. I know a lot of people don't like having to watch, an hour long, training, because I actually try to keep mine short. Now I'm actually going to ask Dana how she actually was able to get down to that 15 minutes. Mine's like 30-minute training, but those links are in the description below. If you want to work, Dana, she works with kids specifically. I work with adults specifically, but we want to answer you guys questions that you do have. So if you guys can put that in the chat. But another question I do actually have for Dana is when it comes to actually the more about, I think the dietary supplements, if there's actually really any differences, I think between children and adults. I have some idea on this, but I want to know if you think there is maybe
Yeah, look,
your opinion on this.
yeah, I mean, I think that they're probably very, very similar. I will say, and I'm a big proponent of this. I've got a free Facebook group where there's 25,000 parents in there, and a lot of the time we get posts in there saying, "What supplement is going to help my kid focus?" There's not one supplement that will help your kid focus. What supplement will help stop the tantrums? There's not one supplement that's going to stop the
Right.
tantrums. I will say that, supplements, as I'm sure Dr. LeGrand is, completely on point with, is that every person is a bio individual, meaning that every person is unique. And so what works really well for one person may show little effect for another. But there are four that I sort of really suggest for as a really good quality base. And then when you do testing, you can add in those extras. I mean, we can't go past a good quality fish oil, can we? So, and I'm sure that
Right.
you are the same with adults as well. There are lots of studies supporting fish oil that support memory, hyperactivity, clear thinking, behavioral disorders, and organization skills. And so I think pretty much every single person can benefit from an omega-3 or a fish oil, because, the American diet these days, and yes, I know I don't sound American, but I do live in Seattle, Washington, same state, and not too far from
Yep.
the man himself over here. um, but yeah, definitely a quality fish oil. A quality probiotic as well. There is a lot of research that suggests taking probiotics can really help with so many things. detoxification, anxiety, mood, support the body against the damaging mental and physical effects of stress. Now, I've actually just created my own probiotics specifically for children,
Wow,
which is
nice.
yeah, which is super exciting.
What's it called?
It's called Pro Thrive, and it's
Oh,
just become
nice.
available on our store. But we've combined. So I really like to use spore forming probiotics because they reseed the gut rather than just putting strains in that can't survive digestion. So
Yeah.
I've contracted 3 spore forming probiotics from Microbiome Labs directly, who come out with Megaspore Biotic.
Hmm.
Then we've added in something called B longum, I think it's 1714, which is a psychobiotic, which can really help with reducing cytokine storms, which can reduce inflammation in the brain and really help with that calm yet focused state of mind. And we've also included saffron in it. And there's a lot of studies that support saffron in kids with ADHD. And there was one study actually that showed that saffron, there was a group of, I don't know, just say 50, I can't remember off the top of my head, but half the group got methylphenidate and half the group got saffron, and their scores were exactly the same in the beginning, the middle, and the end. And so what it shows that saffron was just as effective as methylphenidate, which is
Wow. Wow.
amazing. So we've included that in the probiotic as well. So definitely a probiotic.
Yeah.
Magnesium.
Of course.
It's yeah, downright, 300
Yeah.
processes in the body that it's used for can really make a surprising difference to anxiety, depression, sleep, hyperactivity. So really, really good there. And also for adults, hormones and all of that sort of stuff. And
Yeah.
vitamin D, because, especially where we are,
Oh yeah, in the
everyone,
Northwest. In fact, I
yes.
even said this in the last live stream. A recent patient of mine that I had, after running all the different micronutrient testing and all the testing that we typically run, there's definitely some imbalances, but the definitely clear one. And sometimes it does. Sometimes it can be one thing that can make the night and day difference. And
Yeah,
for her, her vitamin D levels were so shot. And once we actually gave treatment on that, to her, it was like she didn't even have to take the medication anymore. She didn't feel like she had to even take
amazing.
her Ritalin.
Yep.
Her energy was great. Her focus was great. She could be productive at her work. And sometimes it really does just take sometimes where you could actually, that's why testing is so important, which
Mhm.
actually is a question here that we have. I think both you and I can actually answer this one. Whether Love asked question, I'm 67, self-diagnosed with ADHD and autism. My husband is not open to testing or diagnosis. And I know you get this actually a lot with
Mhm.
parents, moms that want, so this might be a good question for you for, parents, maybe the mother really wants to do testing, but the husband might not be on board or the spouse, vice versa. And you mentioned here, I'm intolerant of most fruits and vegetables and many other foods. Are there resources that actually cost money? So the resources, at least from mine, and I think Dana could share with hers, like the free resources. Obviously, I try to do these live streams every single week. Try to answer questions. That's obviously free. I do the videos every single week of YouTube. I also have a free Facebook group for adults. It's called ADHD Natural Solution. Dana's is called ADHD Thrive Institute, right? I
My
think.
Facebook group's called
Oh wait,
ADHD Parent Nutrition Support Group
right.
on
Okay,
Facebook.
that's
Yep.
right. Yep. And I think, I believe I put. I just need to double check, but I'll make sure to put her, all her socials and everything,
Yeah.
also in the
And
description
same
here as
for
well.
anyone tuning in from my channel, because we are going both live to both channels. And so
Yeah.
definitely I'm going to pop those links into the description below on my channel as well.
Yep. Yep. So yeah, I think that's definitely some free resources that both Dana and I have that you can utilize for sure. Otherwise, and because in fact I just dropped a video just today titled how to change your ADHD life in a year, and I
Mm,
literally give a breakdown of a lot of the different steps. Now I do mention about testing, but even still, if you implement a lot of the other steps with even out the testing, it could still make a huge difference. It's just testing gives you more of that clear picture of
yeah.
exactly what to do, and it really cuts down the time of trying to treating your ADHD. So
Yeah.
I think that's one of the probably the biggest things, but I would definitely start using those free resources for sure.
Yeah, I'll also say, like with the intolerance to fruit and vegetables, you may want to look into oxalates, and just do like Google oxalate foods. It could be that you've got a gut breakdown. The fact that you're intolerant to those foods, and you can test that yourself, and you know that in yourself, it will be easy to try and work out what are those foods that are causing that, and actually seeing if they have something in common. Is it salicylates? Is it oxalates? Is it because they feed yeast? Maybe you've got candida. So I'd suggest doing a poop and a food diary, to be honest. Do it for about a week and see if you can pinpoint any trends that are going on, and do an elimination diet, and do that for 2 months, and then add one food back in at a time once a week, one every week. And so you can really see, oh, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's this. But then,
Yeah.
the supplements that we've both been talking about would
Yeah.
definitely, as a base, would help.
Yeah, no, you actually bring up a good point, Dana, about just the food elimination diet. If you want to talk about doing something free, like a free test, the food elimination diet is actually a pretty much a gold standard. It's actually probably the most accurate way of doing it. It just
Hmm.
requires discipline. That's
Yes.
why a lot of people will just go and pay the food allergy test, which can be expensive for some people. But if
Hmm.
you actually do the food elimination diet, where if you have suspect certain foods that are causing issues for you, you eliminate those for at least a month, and then you reintroduce one food group at a time. And you're doing a diet journal as you're doing this to see, okay, is it really that the culprit? And if it is a significant amount of a difference, then it'll remove it, right? But if you don't see much of a difference at all, then this is where Dan talked about, like, before, with allergy testing, it's all over the place. Like,
Hmm.
I think Dan and I are always trying to look for the best type of testing, but even still, sometimes those best type of testing aren't completely 100% accurate that we want to see it. But we're getting there, right? We're getting there. It's just a little bit slower than we would like to see it. I mean, someday, everything is going to be, I feel like, especially when it comes to a lot of I've always talked about this. It's going to be nice when we can actually finally have where we have a chair or something, or even just the ring where it tests everything, your biofeedback, neurofeedback, hydration. In fact,
Amazing.
I mentioned this before. My brother-in-law, his brother is working on something very similar to that. I have no idea when it's going to be released, but it'll actually, he has it set up where it's going to be testing for biofeedback, neurofeedback, hydration. So not just your
Wow.
typical like
Yeah.
heart rate, stuff like that, but someday we'll get there. All right. So next question here. So yeah, if you guys are just all coming in, I know we're getting more people in here, quite a few people. So definitely put your questions in the chat that you have for both me and Dana. Whether you have a kid with ADHD or an adult with ADHD, we can definitely certainly answer those questions. But Helena asked the question, I'm afraid that medication could kill my creativity or personality. How would life be without ADHD if that's the thing you've always known? So either Dana or I both can answer this question. Now, my experience, I think Dana maybe could testify this with her son, but I'm going to just kind of share my experience with medication. And I've shared this before. I was diagnosed when I was in college. I knew I had it when I was a kid, but I wasn't actually really officially diagnosed until I was in college, until schooling really was starting to become really detrimental. And I did do the medication and I was able to, yeah, focus, but the creativity side and my personality, it was a killer. Now, there's actually, and this is just across the board, a lot of professionals, even Dr. Howell, who's written the book,
Yep.
Driven to Distraction. He doesn't even, he has ADHD and he doesn't take medication. He actually states that 20% of people with ADHD actually do not do well with medication. That's just across the board. So if that is you in the case that you are actually having more severe symptoms and issues with your medication, this is where you have a serious conversation with your prescribing doctor about this. Now, if I've always said this, if you have a prescribing doctor that is not willing to work with you, because there is doctors out there, not just holistic doctors, but also even medical doctors that are willing. They're a little bit more hard to find, but they're starting to come on board. I know it's slow. They're starting to come on board because they realize there is something to holistic medicine. There is something, because we're seeing it in research creeping up all the time. there's a lot of facilities, even cancer facilities, that are hiring a lot of holistic doctors, naturopath doctors, osteopathic doctors, because they see that there is value, and there's also a high demand from you guys. The more you start demanding this, and this is where we're starting to seeing a shift, which is amazing. And this is where you really you got to take charge of your own health. And
Yes.
so, you mentioned like how would life, be without ADHD if that's the thing you've always known. So I always have said this too, that for me having ADHD, like it is definitely a double-edged sword. And there's the challenges, but honestly, if you're able to unlock your brain in a capacity where you don't have to have the severity of the symptoms and reducing that, you truly can actually have the superpower of unlocking your ADHD brain to where it can benefit you. Now, if you're
Yeah.
finding that medications are sabotaging that too much, this is where you have a serious conversation with your doctor about, okay, maybe I like being creative. That is actually my profession. Maybe you're an artist. Maybe you're somebody that relies on being creative. And anytime you're taking medication, you're not able to be creative. And that's your livelihood. So you have to look at other avenues. And that's what, Dana and I do, is helping a more natural way to be able to treat you without necessarily the medication. But both of us do work with kids Dana works with kids, I work with adults that use medication along as a support treatment with natural treatment. Dana, do you have any
Yeah.
other
And while we're trying to reduce that inflammation, these symptoms, these not so fun symptoms of ADHD are exacerbated by inflammation in the body. And a lot of people are in a state of inflammation. The inflammation is in the gut. It's traveling to the brain. It's stopping you from being able to focus. Just one example of that is candida, for example. Candida can actually cause brain fog. Brain fog is AKA inability to focus. And so we really want to optimize the body so we don't need to go on medication. Obviously, I can't prescribe a medication, Dr. LeGrand. I don't think that you can,
not
ADHD
in the state of
specific.
Washington, I can prescribe lots of different medications, but controlled substances,
Yeah.
no. So
So the approach is, let's try to get to the root of what's causing those symptoms. Let's reduce that so you can then, as Dr. Gran said, optimize your superpowers. And that's what it's about. You've got these superpowers. Let's optimize your body so you can embrace them and you can live your best life. So, if you love your superpowers of ADHD, we don't need to get rid of them. Let's just optimize the rest of your body so you can function the best that you can and, embrace those superpowers.
yeah, awesome. All right, I got another question here from a Facebook user, and then again, just reiterate, we got quite a few people here. Come on, ask your questions. I know there's like an 8-second delay, but I feel like a broken record every time. I always have to tell you guys, just put your questions in the chat. Don't be shy. That's what we're here for. What we're doing this live stream is to answer all your questions for both adults as well as kids with ADHD, because Dana focuses on kids, I focus on adults. So the question is, have either of you actually had any experience with Bacopa Menhir? So I'll start. I mean, yes, I have, and I know, Dana could testify to this. So Bacopa Menhir, like, usually we see in a lot of different blends. You guys know I love doing these little 30-day, challenge experiments with one ingredient. And I've done ginkgo biloba. I haven't done Bacopa Menhir. That's probably on my to-do list to eventually do that, to experiment with that. But I have used it with a lot of different patients, and ginkgo biloba and also Bacopa Menhir are very similar because they're in the same family. There is some just subtle differences with it. I think with Bacopa Menhir, to me, I think what I've noticed is like ginkgo is great for bringing blood flow to the brain, oxygen to the brain, nutrients to the brain. And then Bacopa, I think, helps a little bit more on the anxiety part of it, but it also does help a lot with the focus too. But I don't know, what experience have you had with it,
Yeah,
Dana?
look, to be honest, I haven't had that great experience in like that it actually does anything. I remember trying it with my son all those years ago, did absolutely nothing. And I will say, like, but the one thing that I haven't tried is, once we reduce inflammation in the body, trying it when the body's in that optimal state. So for me, and as I said, like all these I've got this Facebook group, Dr. LeGrand's got one for adults, and people are asking all the time, oh, what's this supplement going to do? Can this supplement help? I will tell you that if you are still pounding the body with inflammatory foods and your body's in a state of dysfunction, no supplement out there is actually going to work. So if you can't make the commitment to reduce inflammation in your body, brain, and gut at the same time as bringing in some of these supplements, you're going to end up with a lot of expensive poop, to be honest, and because it's going to come out, you're not going to be able to digest it. It's not going to get to where it needs to go. I use this analogy that, especially when we're working with kids. We want to bake a pie. We want to bake a good pie. It doesn't have to be the most amazing pie, but it just wants to be a good pie. And there are many elements to baking that good pie. And obviously you can't bake a pie without the pastry. So the pastry is the diet. The diet is the foundation of everything. When you're building a house, if you don't have a solid foundation, it's not going to be a very strong house. And you need that pie crust for that pie to be good. Foundation. Then you've got the filling in the pie. So that's those other things, getting to those root causes of what's actually contributing to symptoms, and really, doing those lab testing, bringing in some of those supplements that are targeting exactly what you need for your body. Things like cinnamon might be chiropractic care. The cloves may be meditation. So we're bringing in all these elements to make this really good pie, and there are multiple ones of them. So I know that's like not answering directly your question about Bacopa, but when I have used it with families who haven't reduced that inflammation yet, we haven't had any success. So maybe you could try it after you've reduced inflammation in your body and you're in a good optimum state of health, if you still need it. But usually by then, and hopefully by then, you won't need it, because we've really gotten to the root of what's actually causing those symptoms.
Yeah, no, for sure. Another question someone asked here, is this being recorded for replay? So yes, it is. It's both on Dana's YouTube channel. So like, if you guys want to follow her on YouTube, is it called Thrive Institute?
It's called ADHD Thrive Institute.
Yeah, it is her YouTube channel. It's also recorded on my YouTube channel as well, which is Dr. LeGrand Optimal Mind Performance. And also, if you're on Facebook, it should be on my Facebook group or Facebook page. So there is the replay there. But
and I did try to put it to my Facebook group, but it didn't work.
I know. Next time.
I'm wondering if I can like download it and then upload it to there.
You might be able to. Yeah. But so okay. But yeah. Next, let me see here. Look, question. So I know we are getting more people as the time's going through. Put your guys' questions here in the chat that you have for us. Specifically, if you have any questions on, treatment, I wanted to kind of also just reiterate about just kind of on the supplement part of it. And I think you guys heard me talk a lot about this, is not one supplement is really usually going to be the cure. Like saying, there is no like magic pill. It does take a lot of work. It does take more than just taking an actual supplement. Supplements, the reason why we call them supplements is because supplements are actually supplementing something that we're not getting in our diet or in our lifestyle. Or when I say that, are we actually removing barriers, removing the toxic things that are actually sabotaging everything else? So this is when we're talking about differences here too. I think with adults, this is something that I think is very, very critical. A kid that's in a loving home, might not have to experience this as much unless there's some stressors at school, right? An adult, on the other hand, if they're in an abusive relationship, if they're in a work environment that's super stressful, or any kind of other relationships with their family, it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter really if you are taking the best foods, you have the best treatments or medications or supplements, all of it. If you do not remove those toxic behaviors, it sabotages everything. It just does. Yeah. And I can't emphasize this enough, because I see it time and time again where, people get so frustrated because like, look, I eat the most cleanest diet. I exercise all the time, all of this. And then when we actually talk about really the nit and gritty of like their environment, that's like, that has to be taken care of. This is why you can't heal. Your body can't heal because you are in so much amount of stress at work or in your relationship that you can't function. And the same goes with kids, I'm sure, right? And like, I mean, can you
100%.
testify from this?
Yeah, and look, I also think it's, we as parents bring up kids, it's not easy. Let's just be real here. Even for those that don't have challenges, parenting's tough. And so, there is going to be some stress. So really, really focusing on changing that parenting approach. That's one of the things that we teach in our program. We actually have a resident behavioral and parent therapist who does group coaching calls once a week inside our program, because it is that is one of the ingredients, is reducing that stress in the home. And we're all guilty of it, barking at our kids, and because we're stressed. But I will also say, the one of the silent contributors to all of this is trauma, and it's not talked about a lot, and things, so many different things can cause that trauma. It doesn't have to be something like a big traumatic event. Even just childbirth itself is trauma. And so, really making sure that you're clearing all of that trauma, and your, kids in particular regulate their nervous system through their parents up until the age of 12. And so, their parents' nervous system is the key to their nervous system. So that's a really, really important thing to understand. And so completely agree with you there that, if you've got chronic stress in your life, anything that you will do is not going to work, because that chronic stress is an underlying, it's a silent killer. It really is. And stress can create gut breakdown. You think about, like, when you get stressed and you get that acid reflux, that's what stress does.
Here we got someone piece. She just replied, the big problem is compliance at school. Do you have any some word of wisdom on this
Oh,
one?
yes, I love it. Love it, love it, love it. Good question, Pace. Look, compliance can be hard at school. It's really about taking the child on a journey with you. This is what I did wrong back in the day. I took gluten, dairy, soy out of my family's diet, including 40 food sensitivities on day one. Okay, so I never gave my family an opportunity to slowly adjust to change. You want to, when you change something, change is scary, but if you change it slowly, all of a sudden it becomes part of your new normal and you don't notice it anymore. Friday nights might be your pizza night, but if you change that, within a month, something else is going to be your new normal. Now, with school, we really want to make sure that again, it will depend on the kid's age. If they're under teenage years, then you control it completely. You don't need to worry. You want to send the lunch. You want to have conversations with the lunch, with the cafeteria. You want to give treats at school. So you want to give the teacher better for you candy and treats, and you can even put like cupcakes or something in the freezer for when birthdays happen. And so having those conversations with the school, you've got the ability to control that. Don't have money in their lunch money account, so they can't actually go and buy anything. But as they get older, it's really about getting them to understand the feelings inside their body. And so we have conversations at home about body feelings, and every day before we have dinner, we talk about how our body felt today. And so, I may start and say, today I felt really, really happy. And what that felt like inside my body is I felt like, the color yellow. I felt like sunshine was coming out of my heart. I felt like I wanted to smile, felt like I wanted to cuddle you. And I love to feel happy. And that's my preference. And then on a day where I might feel angry, I might go, look, today I felt angry. I felt really tight and closed off. I felt like I wanted to be by myself. I felt like the color blue. So you're training them to understand and have the words that they can put into it. And then everyone goes around the table, and you do that every day. So everyone learns how to look inwards to the feelings of the body. Now, when you're changing the diet, when they, try to test the boundaries and they go and eat something at school and then they have that inevitable meltdown, that's when you can say, hey, buddy, I noticed today you seemed really angry. Your fists were tight and you're scrunched up in your face. Don't do this when they're having the tantrum. Do it afterwards. They're going to be like, but you just say, like, I'm curious, how did that feel inside your body? And they'll explain it. And you can say, well, look, I know that you prefer to feel happy. That's what you said at dinner time. And the reason that we're changing our diet is because we want you to feel happy more often. And this is an exact example of when we eat this food, how our body reacts. So you want them to understand what's going on in their body so they can really tie those feelings. My son's 13 now, and he can make that conscious decision whether he eats something or not, and he does sometimes, and we all pay for it. But given that we know how to get back on track really, really quickly, and they've got to go through this as a learning process. But you've got to be having these conversations.
Yeah. No, awesome. Yeah, no, some really good tips there. Hopefully that helped you out, Peace. Another question we got here from GV112. Myself and son, this is a good question for adult and also kid. So myself and son, 12, have ADHD. I think lifestyle changes take time to show results. Coaching, family support, and mindfulness, especially for kids, might be faster to show results. Thoughts? So you want to take this on as far as just on the kids part?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you can totally comment on
Yeah,
the
the
parent
adult
side.
part. Yep.
Look, coaching and accountability are like the most important things here, especially if both of you have got ADHD. And so, it really depends on what lifestyle changes you are making. I can tell you, like, when you take out gluten, for example, for some kids, you can see a change within 2 weeks. That was my son. For others, it can take 3 to 6 to 12 months to stop reacting in the body. And you can actually see that on lab testing. And so, if things get worse before they get better, that could be gluten detox. And that's actually a good thing. I love when families like, oh my God, all of a sudden he's like even more worse. And I'm like, yes, that's good, because that means we're going to have a really good response. So yeah, it does take time. However, if you don't have a solid plan where you go step by step by step, you're kind of like using Dr. Google out there. You're like trying what one person said in a Facebook group. And this is what I did. I can tell you, I spent well over $180,000 in trying to get my son to a place that he is in today, because there was no one out there like me and Dr. LeGrand. And would I change it for the world? No, because now I'm able to do what I do, and I've helped now over 1,000 other families do the same. And so, like, I can tell you, I tried everything under the sun. So you want to make sure that you've got that clear, concise, step-by-step plan, so you know that what you're doing is right. Having that coaching, so when you run into those challenges, things like at school, like we were talking about, picky eating, all of that sort of stuff, so you have the expertise to overcome them, so you don't use them as a barrier. Family support is huge. However, I can tell you the amount of families that we've had come into our program where, say, the grandparents aren't on board, we can help you overcome that barrier as well. We've got a letter to the grandparents. There's so many different things and strategies that when you use a professional like Dr. LeGrand or myself, it can be super, super helpful to get you where you need to go faster. I can tell you, if I had what I had, I created what I have now because I didn't have all of these elements. And you're right, it is multiple things. It's detox, it's gut health, it's diet, it's supplements, it's mindfulness, it's reducing stress. So there are all of these ingredients that go into baking that good pie.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I think these are, I want to kind of like emphasize on this. And before I get to there, we have a few more minutes. So if you guys do have questions, do put them in the chat. Don't hold off on that. I have a few more minutes with Dana, but kind of on the adult side. So on this side, I think, does kids actually, see to end up getting results faster? From my experience, honestly, like Dana said, it really depends on the person. And the thing that even when back then, when I would actually work with both kids and adults, now I just work with just adults right now. You got to understand that, and this is where Dana really does shine, because she's a parent herself and she knows what it is like work with a kid, because you're working with the parent and the child. And so it definitely brings its own complication. Whereas when I'm working with just an adult directly, it all depends on, again, how the follow through is. How compliant are you actually following through with the treatment? And on top of that, I've seen people with this adults, I'm just talking strictly with adults, where within just 2 weeks, sometimes within a week within their treatment plan, it's like a night and day difference.
I
And in
know.
other cases, it might be 3 to 4 months before they
Yep.
actually see a difference. And it really does come down to the individual and why it's like that. We're not computers. We're not like, the body is so complex that when we do run testing and see, okay, here, and I'll tell you, like every time I run this testing, it's not always the same. It just isn't. Just
Mhm.
because everyone has ADHD doesn't mean ADHD is always the same. Same with like when people think everybody with ADHD has low dopamine and norepinephrine levels. It's not always the case. It just
No.
isn't. It's maybe about 50% of the case, maybe even less, actually, the more and more I do this. But when you actually can fine tune that, you can actually cut the time. Because back then, when I was running my physical practice and trying to even figure this out with, I figured it out for myself, but like trying to figure it out for others and not having access to a lot of these different testing that I use now, it took longer to try to kind of find results because, it was like, okay, I see the research. Typically, this works for HD by adding this supplement or adding this type of diet, but it still took longer. But when you add the testing part of it, it really quickened the process of
Yeah.
getting the results. And there's more and more testing that, is being fine tuned and that we're seeing. And both Dana and I are always looking at, better ways to be able to, is there better testing that can give us a lot more information and help our patients get there even faster. So
Yeah.
I would not say there is a difference really when it comes to kids and adults per se. However, I will say it might take longer for adults if you have a lot more health complications. For example, if you're someone with
Mhm.
ADHD, you have diabetes, you have high blood pressure, you have depression, anxiety, like you have so many other complications, it will take longer. However, I keep on saying however, you actually might see a dramatic difference because your health is so low, like you have all these complications that you actually might see the results faster, at least in some of these areas, than someone that maybe comes and sees me with ADHD that maybe the only problem that they have is just they don't have as much focus. And that's it.
Yeah.
That's the only complication they have.
I
Now
agree with
that,
you there.
yeah,
Yeah.
wouldn't you
Totally,
say so?
totally.
Exactly. Like it
Yeah.
might seem like it might take longer because their severity isn't that high. So
Yeah.
again, this is always what it comes down to the individual of the time frame on here.
And I will
So
say, like, to add to that, I mean, yeah, when I've got kids that come to me that, have these meltdowns, these tantrums, this emotional dysregulation, focus, all of the things, I'm like, yes, we can, you'll see good results pretty quickly. When you've got someone that just has a focus issue, focus is usually the last thing that improves out of all of this. And so it will take longer. But I will say it takes you X number of years to get to the state of dysfunction that you're currently in. So for kids, that X number of years is much shorter. And so you've got to understand that it won't be that overnight fix because it took you this long to get there, and it's going to take you not as long to get to fix it, but it's still going to take time. And so knowing that, you can reset your expectations, but as both of us have said, it could be for some it can happen really, really quickly because we may see straight away what that driving factor is. Like, as I said, when I see C diff and it's super high, I'm like, yes, that's amazing, because I know they're going to have really good results.
all right. I'll answer two more questions. But just before we do end, I do want to emphasize that you can actually, if you want to work with Dana directly, you can look in the description below. There's a link where you can watch a quick training from her, very in depth, of how she actually helps parents with their kids with ADHD specifically. Also, Dana, where can they find you and other social
Yeah,
medias and other following?
ADHD Thrive Institute.com. That's my website. On there, you'll find all the socials, but Instagram and Facebook at ADHD Thrive Institute. As Dr. LeGrand said, I've got a free Facebook group that's got over 25,000 parents in it that all have kids with ADHD. It's such a great support system in there. That's called ADHD Parent Nutrition Support Group. Dr. LeGrand, do you want to share as well? Because I've got people watching from my
Yeah,
end,
for
and we will
sure.
pop your links into my description
Yeah,
as
so if you
well.
want to book, you could book a free discovery call with us directly. You can contact with one of my team members, our head coach, and just to kind of find out more about how we do help adults with ADHD specifically and the services that we do provide. You can also follow me on YouTube. You can subscribe to this channel if you're directly here. If you have not subscribed, to optimal mind performance. And then also we do have a free adult Facebook group called HD Natural Solution. I am also on Instagram. You can follow me through there. It's Dr. LeGrand, as well as I'm on TikTok now. All
Yeah,
those
same.
socials.
I don't like being on there, but I'm there.
I
And I'm
know
on
it
YouTube
is
as
what it
well.
is.
So if you want to follow me, I'm at
Right.
ADHD Thrive Institute on YouTube as well. Subscribe.
Yeah. All right. So we'll answer these last few questions that we do have here. First one here, this is an interesting one. And then we get this one a lot. Is Strattera safe for long-term use? So I always say this, obviously, when we're online, we can't give like specific medical advice on this, but what I will say here is I'll tell you the research. And Dana can probably maybe talk a little bit more about the research she's also seen on this. So Strattera, is definitely an HD medication, and long-term use, a lot of people, yes, successfully use different medications long-term use. Now, when people are coming to seek me because they have the concern of using something long-term and they maybe don't like the side effects of it, because there is definitely side effects with a lot of different HD medications, especially if you have a heart condition, and maybe long-term use of that might not be the best for you. There's also studies out there where I've seen where long-term use of ADHD medication, understand what it's doing in the brain. It's blocking the reuptake of these neurotransmitters. Now, what that means is basically our brain chemistry, so whether it's dopamine, norepinephrine, is constantly naturally producing it at a natural balance. Now, people with ADHD are not producing it as much. So what the medication does, it blocks the feedback loop, is what we call it, to actually communicate, hey, we're making enough. You can slow down now. That's what the feedback is. So what the medication does actually stops that communication. So therefore, it only just constantly is going to be dumping and producing it. You take that away, this is what we call a withdrawal effect. You take that away, people will have, especially if you go cold turkey on medication, you will have withdrawal effects and have severe symptoms. Now, there's a right way to doing this. If you're wanting to not have to use medication long term, you work with your prescribing doctor of how you can naturally, slowly cut down on the dosages. But what the research also I've seen is when you are taking some long-term use, they've seen where up to 20%, yet your body actually is not naturally producing some of these different neurotransmitters. So that's like now, can you get that back? Yeah, I've seen it where people have gone from where they've taken a medication long-term and then they start, withdrawing from it and reducing it and then doing things all just naturally, and they're able to get their levels back to where they are. So that's just like, what I've seen. What about you, Dana?
Yeah, look, I can't comment on medication. You should always seek your doctor's input on that. I will say with, any medication, whether it's ADHD medication or not, is toxic. It's going to break down our gut. It's going to cause a toxic load on our body. I like to think of like, we're all born with this bucket, and our goal through life is to, as you probably haven't already tell, I love using analogies. So everyone's born with this bucket, and our goal in life is to keep the load on that bucket low. And, but all these things go in it, things like bad diet, medication, environmental toxins, heavy metals, all of that sort of stuff. Some of us, our genetics are really good and we are able to empty our bucket out of our body really easily. Whereas others, fellow Aussie, hello.
I put up there.
G'day, mate. How you going? We're able to empty our bucket out easily. But however, a lot of us, especially those with ADHD, may have compromised detoxification pathways and have genetics that predispose them to that load on their body, so they can't effectively, and sorry, I'm looking at the comments. Yes, Sydney as well.
I'm distracting you.
Yeah, I'm from Sydney too. I live in Seattle, Washington now, but I am from Sydney. So they can't empty those contents out, and the load on the bucket gets higher and higher and higher until it spills over into that body, and we're toxic. That's inflammation. It goes to our brain, it goes to our gut. And so, medication does add to that load. Full stop, whether or not it is ADHD, blood pressure, whatever it may be, it does add to that load. But I will say with Strattera, it's similar to another non-amphetamine drug called Intuniv. My son was on Intuniv plus dexamethylphenidate plus, clonidine, and wanted him to put on an SSRI. And he was on Intuniv. And that was the hardest medication to get off. And that's because it's a blood pressure medication. If he missed one pill, he would be having tingles all over his body. He would get dizzy because his blood pressure. And I think to myself, man, he missed one pill. Like, that could not be doing good things to his body. We had to titrate really, 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 really slowly to get him off that. And Strattera is similar to that. And so, if it doesn't work for your child, then you should be speaking to your doctor about something else if you want it, or go down the natural path. That's what we're here talking about today.
Yeah. All right, Dana, I do want to respect your time. It seems like everyone
This
now
is
is trying to ask
fun.
questions.
This is
Ask
fun.
questions. Do you have a few more minutes? I mean,
I
we
do.
could
I
rapid
do.
fire. We could rapid
husband's
fire. We
My
could rapid
husband's
fire the
taking my
questions.
youngest to
Okay.
baseball. My other one's doing his homework.
Okay. I have a few more minutes too. So
Yeah.
if you guys have questions, why don't we rapid fire through these questions? Now you guys are asking more questions. That's what happens. So let's rapid fire through these questions. I did want to just, in St. McLean. Yeah, we actually met back in September. Good to see you, man. And let's go to Floor. Ask question. How early or how old could a child be diagnosed for ADHD? Do you want to take this
Yeah.
one?
Yeah, look, it varies so much, and the guidelines change all the time. My son was diagnosed at 4, but then when some people hear that, they're like, "Oh my gosh, 4! Like, my doctor won't even look at us until we're 8." So
Yeah.
it ranges so much. At the end of the day, everything falls under this umbrella. And whether it's symptoms of ADHD and you suspect it, everything that we're talking about will help with those symptoms, whether it's classified as ADHD. The only really need for a diagnosis is to either get support at school via an IEP or a 504, or to get medication. So, pick your path. And, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter if there's a full diagnosis or not, as long as you are doing and implementing all the strategies you need to help your child thrive.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I mean, like I'll say that. Like I've seen people diagnosed even as young as age 3,
Yeah.
and so it just it's they, like you said, they changed the guidelines quite a bit. So, but yeah, that's what I've seen. But I personally, my opinion on it, because I've gotten a lot of parents ask me this, like, how soon should someone get diagnosed? In my opinion, and I personally, I would say until they get into actually like maybe like at least kindergarten or first grade, when they're actually doing some more heavier school tasks and stuff like that, where it can
Yeah.
present more. I think age 3, in my opinion, I think is too young. Even age 4,
Yeah.
I think is a
Way
little
too
bit too
young.
young.
Yep.
I think you wait until like they're 6, 7, I
Yeah.
think is a good
But also, I
age.
will say, make sure you get proper testing,
Oh,
because
yes.
getting a form filled out, given to you by your pediatrician, filling out by you and a teacher, that is not okay for a diagnosis. The gold standard is to get, a proper neurobehavioral psychologist or specific ADHD specialist at doing a battery of tests. And sometimes that's over 3 or 4 sessions with your child. So it should not be diagnosed by your pediatrician, because that's really not an accurate way to diagnose.
Yeah. We're getting lots of questions here, so let's do these quick. So, does neurofeedback, I'm assuming that's what they're saying, yeah, neurofeedback
Yep.
work for kids with focus and hyperactivity? I have things on this, but go
Yeah,
ahead,
look,
Dana.
I will tell you that anything when your body's in a state of inflammation is not going to work. We have so many families that come to us after spending over $10,000 with brain balance, and then they come to us and they're like, "Well, we thought we saw something while we were doing it, and now there's nothing." If your body's in a state of inflammation, no other ingredient is going to work like it needs to.
Oh,
So
yeah.
chiropractic care is not going to work like it needs to. So what you need to do is reduce the inflammation in the body, the brain, and the gut first, and then you might not even need neurofeedback. Or if you do need that for a little bit of focus, that's when the body can actually receive that and it can work properly.
Yeah, no, I definitely concur on this one because I did a lot of training and investment in neurofeedback, and I've seen results, but it still was like 50-50. Like some people get amazing results, some don't. And that's why I shifted how I started treating people with HD, because I saw a lot better results by looking at the inflammation, things in the gut, looking at the imbalances of the body chemistry. Because I've always said this, coaching does amazing. Therapy can do wonders. But if you don't change the body chemistry first, it does nothing. And this
Yeah.
is why a lot of people with HD struggle with doing like brain hacks or self-improvement books or coaching or any stuff. And they're like, why am I still having this problem? It's because you haven't changed the body chemistry first. You got to
Mm-hmm.
do that first. And then, like Dana was saying, then yeah, maybe neurofeedback actually will actually finally work for you. But if you have too much inflammation and imbalances, like you got to change that first. So yeah, that's all right. Now let's go next question here. Having trouble determining if my ADHD symptoms come from internal factors such as genes, neurochemistry, or external factors such as a life circumstances. Any steps I should take before getting diagnosed? Okay, so you haven't been diagnosed. So and Dana could talk about this too, but my big thing here is it all does apply as far as the internal and also the external factors. I think we already
Mm-hmm.
talked about how important external factors. If you don't address the external factors, it will sabotage everything that you're trying to do, especially when you're addressing the internal factors. Now, I work with people who also, I would say probably like almost like half the people I work with don't even have the official diagnosis.
Same.
They don't. Guess what? Both Dan and I don't need the diagnosis. Why? It's just a label. But when we actually look at you as an individual and look at your actually body chemistry, that gives us way more information than any diagnosis can give us.
Mm-hmm.
And doctors don't do that. So if you're looking at like the first steps, if you're an adult, you can work through me. If you have a kid, with Dana, that's our very first steps. Is we really emphasize the importance of actually testing to see what is going on for you specifically as an individual. Not you as an ADHD person, but you as an individual. What are the imbalances in your brain chemistry and body chemistry? But did you want to add anything to that?
100% agree. 100%
Okay.
agree. All of that
All right.
plays into it. And, I will say genetics, I can tell you that I run a DNA test and there is a test on there showing whether or not your genetics predispose you to ADHD tendencies. And I can tell you that I've done it on so many kids, and literally only 20% or 30% have the genetics for ADHD. And that is blowing my mind, because that means that like 70% have been diagnosed incorrectly. But you can show tendencies based on your lifestyle, based on your environment, based on your internal and your external stress factors. So you are 100% spot on.
Yeah. All right. And St. McLean, I have just recently got diagnosed and I'm getting ready to hit 40, and I'm now taking Vyvanse. It has really helped. Like to the extreme. Is taking meds daily a bad thing? I just got here. So, I mean, most people with ADHD, usually that's how they're going to be treated, is like taking the medications. Now, you will find, especially working with your prescribing doctor, talking about the possibility, and I know a lot of people will do this, is taking a break on the weekends. But again, you don't get this advice from here. You got to talk to your prescribing doctor about this. But there's ways to not where you don't necessarily have to take it every day, but you do need to talk to your prescribing doctor about that. So I know you just got recently diagnosed, and we've talked as well in person. We met at Vid Summit. So, but yeah, that's what I'd look
And
at.
I'd also say, like, just go back and listen. If you just got here, go back and listen. Maybe about 20 minutes ago, someone was talking about Strattera, and we talked about, taking medication constantly. So that would be a good one for you to listen to.
Here's a pretty hot topic. I don't know if we want to tackle this one, but I'll put it up here. What are your thoughts on vaccinations causing ADHD?
Okay.
Take it away.
I really like to stay agnostic on this topic.
So do I.
And that is because, Big Brother out there is watching. My business is all online. But I will say that if you were on listening when I was talking about the toxic load in the bucket, they add to that load in the bucket. Okay. That being said, look, there are some people that should not take vaccinations based on what's going on in their body, in their genetics, and that can push them over the edge. I personally don't think vaccines cause autism. However, I think that if someone's load on their bucket is really high already, and then they have those vaccines all together, that can push the bucket over. That's when all the symptoms come out. So the timing, shows. And so that's really, like, in essence, what my thoughts is on it.
Yeah.
And I really like my personal opinion and everything, I like to keep really agnostic on it, because I don't want to be shut down.
No, I'm the same way. So yeah, I think we're both on the same boat there. Next question here. Also wondering, is long-term supplementation with B complex considered relatively safe? Thanks. Really good question. So you gotta understand. So something like B complex, B vitamins, it's something that our body needs every single day. What I will say was the best source is always going to be food, right?
Yes.
I personally, Dana, you could, comment on this too, but I personally using supplements initially, but transitioning my patients to using foods.
Yeah.
Why? Because that's always going to be the best source. But it is very difficult to get people to transition to the foods that you want them to do. It takes time, especially I'm sure with kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, comment
Yeah.
on this one.
Yeah, look, I totally agree with you. I mean, food is the foundation of everything. And so like we want to sort of heal the body first and then like look at, okay, well, where can we be getting all of these nutrients from? I will say like I love organ meat supplementation. It is made from food. It's not processed in a laboratory like a B complex, synthetic vitamins and things like that. So I'd rather get organ meat. Organ meat is the grass-fed organ meat is the highest source of vitamin B12 on the planet. And so, to get that from food is, amazing. Plus it also gives you all of these other B vitamins as well. So totally agree
Yeah.
with Dr. LeGrand there.
Yeah. All right, we got two more questions. Then I think we'll go to good night. Thank you
Yep.
guys so much for attending.
This has been
Have you guys?
fun.
Yeah, have you guys enjoyed this? You can let us know in the chat. So, question from your good friend from Sydney. Question: other than L-tyrosine, what supplements should I add to my stack in order for me to regulate my ADHD?
You can
So,
take that one.
yeah, I'll take this one. I mean, because I think you mentioned it here as an adult. So tyrosine. What I'll say about a tyrosine, people always ask me, what do you actually usually tend to recommend the most? And of course, over time, worth working a long time, there's certain supplements that I do recommend more than others, and it's all based off of the testing. Tyrosine is probably one of the ones that are like not the most, but
Mm,
it all depends again on testing. I'd say L-theanine is actually one of my favorite ones, especially for
mm,
adults, because I do see because L-theanine impacts a lot more of the neurotransmitters than actually tyrosine. Tyrosine only helps impact dopamine. So if we have issues with dopamine, and also norepinephrine, then that's something that we would prescribe. But however, tyrosine is actually naturally, it's a non-essential amino acid. What does that mean? That means that we get it from our food. So that
mm-hmm.
means like, well,
Not
actually,
made in
no,
the body.
our body actually makes it from the food. And so we don't necessarily, that's why it becomes non-essential. But people are like, then why is tyrosine important? Because there's certain cofactors and enzymes that people with ADHD tend to be more deficient in. And that's where testing is so important to see, like, do you really need to take tyrosine or not? It's not always
Mm-hmm.
the case. But other ones I would say, yeah, like L-theanine, adrenal support is a big one with adults. So like I mentioned about like adrenal desiccated and other adrenal support things. But those are some big ones, as well as like DL-phenylalanine is another big amino acid that I do tend to see deficient with adults. But those are just a few big ones. All right, last question here, which I think is a good one to finish off, is how do we ask our doctor about getting ourselves tested?
Oh, I love this one. Look, unfortunately, most MDs will not do these tests. They won't know about them. They're not covered by insurance, which is very, very frustrating because, I know that we could probably help a lot more people. This is the holistic care approach. And, unfortunately, the medical industry is driven by pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies, and it's sick care rather than healthcare. It should be renamed, and so they're diagnosing and they're prescribing a medication to treat the symptoms of that diagnosis. And so doing this, these testing that will help, bring you to optimum health, well, that's not going to benefit the pharmaceutical companies because the people are not going to need their medication. It's not going to benefit the insurance companies because people are not going to need their medication and people are not going to need the insurance. And it's this vicious cycle. So it's really unfortunate. Most MDs out there will not order these tests for you. You may
Yeah.
find a functional doctor, but even then they're straddling both worlds. because they want to make sure that you can get things covered by insurance. So a lot of the time they don't suggest these other tests because they're not covered by insurance.
Right.
So finding a practitioner that can order these for you is definitely the way to go. Adults, Dr. LeGrand over there, contact him. He can order them for you. And for kids, I work with kids all over
Yeah.
the USA. And so it doesn't matter what state someone's in to do this.
Yeah, so that's a good segue. I mean, yeah. So if you are having a hard time trying to find a functional medicine doctor or something to even run these tests, again, even finding a functional medicine doctor that actually specializes in ADHD. Both Dana and I do. I focus on adults. Dana focuses on kids. Our information is in the description below. So definitely reach out to us. You can book a free discovery call with us. Definitely watch Dana's free training, and then it will prompt you to book a call with her team and stuff like that to find out more about her program and how she does help parents with kids with ADHD. So that's what I would suggest, because yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and you do need to be careful. And I will say this: is ordering tests online, such as like Amazon and stuff like that. They actually charge you
Yeah.
for the kit when it actually should be free. Then when you actually ship it to the lab, guess what? The lab sends you a fee because they charge their own fee. So I don't like, oh, it's only $200 to buy it on Amazon. It's like they just charge you an extra $200 because now you got to pay a fee with the lab to run it, and then you actually have to have a doctor sign off on it,
Yeah.
and that also
Or
doesn't include the interpretation either. So
interpretation, yeah.
yeah,
And I will also say, just as Dr. LeGrand said, it's important to find a practitioner that actually specializes in ADHD because,
yep,
I know for me when I'm looking at kids, kids in the general population, they don't have these patterns. I've worked with over 1,000 other families and kids, and I see similar patterns. I know what, one out of range marker means absolutely nothing. But when you see these patterns across these tests, you know what they add up together.
I like this comment. Thank you for doing this. It's really helpful. I'm getting more information from you than from my psychiatrist. Well, I'm glad that we were able to provide you value for there. And then also, another person said, you guys are both amazing. Really
Oh,
appreciate the
thank
super
you.
more live stream. Thank you. Yeah, hopefully we can have Dana back, and we actually will
Yeah,
maybe do more of a specific topic.
yeah.
Just let us know. I'm always trying to find some good topics to do these live streams, and I think especially having that perspective for both kids and adults.
I think it's great.
I think it's
Yeah,
great. I think I now finally found someone. I know I've been telling you guys who've been following me that I haven't been taking kids for a while because I am 100% now focusing on adults. I think both we can serve you better that way,
definitely.
and that's how I found it. So I'm really happy to partner with Dana to be able to now just have anybody with kids. You can see Dana.
And
We do
vice
things
versa.
very similar. Yeah.
I get reached out so much for people who are like, "Do you deal with adults?" I'm like, "No, I don't. I'm sorry." But I'm so glad, and it's great. Dr. LeGrand's literally probably 20 minutes from my house, which
Yep.
is amazing. So we're both dealing with this beautiful Pacific Northwest rainy weather.
Yep. It'll get better. But
It
so
will. It
thanks
will.
again. Thank you guys so much. And we'll
Thanks,
see you guys in the
everybody.
next one. Okay. Thanks.